Mitt Romney said corporations are people, and today the Supreme Court said corporations have the religious freedoms of people too. Today, these 5 conservative justices, all men, they ruled that a private corporation can deny birth control coverage to women employees solely because of the company's religious beliefs. The Hobby Lobby Corporation claimed the Affordable Care Act violated its freedom of religion. And believe it or not, the court agreed, saying the corporation's religious beliefs trumped the human rights of its employees. But in a blistering dissent, Justice Ginsburg called out her 5 male colleagues for the, quote, startling breadth of their decision. She criticized the havoc of the court's ruling and said the court had ventured into a minefield. Outside the courthouse, protesters responded to the ruling.
You know, I am very lucky to be on the insurance plan that I am under right now, but in the future, if I am employed by someone like Hobby Lobby, I don't think it's their right to tell me that I can't access certain legal FDA-approved forms of birth control based on their opinions.
Today's ruling opens the door to other corporations challenging laws they don't like by claiming those laws violate their religious freedom. Joining me now are Jeff Rosen of the National Constitution Center and Jess McIntosh of Emily's List. Thank you both for being here.
Great to be here.
Nice to be here, Reverend.
Jeff, let me start with you. What's your response to the ruling?
Well, as you noted, Justice Ginsburg called it startlingly broad, and she said that it could open the floodgates to allowing religious corporations to refuse to pay taxes, to refuse vaccinations for their employees, to refuse to participate in stem cell tests. She was very concerned that this would allow people to opt out of laws prohibiting racial discrimination and discrimination against gays and lesbians, all on religious grounds. Now, the majority disagreed. Justice Alito said, well, those cases are different. We're limiting this ruling to closely held corporations, that is, owned by just 5 people or more, and he dismissed these concerns. But the truth is, we really don't know how broad it is, and even the Walmart Corporation could qualify as closely held under that definition. You know, if it's family-owned, it could be the case that even large corporations whose owners have religious beliefs could try to impose those beliefs on their employees.
Let me push you a little, Jeff, because Justice Ginsburg warned that today's ruling could open the door to their religious exemptions. Things like blood transfusions if your company is owned by Jehovah's Witnesses, for example. Antidepressants if you're a Scientologist. Anesthesia and intravenous fluids and pills coated with gelatin. Which can also be derived from pigs and may be offensive to Muslims, Jews, and Hindus, and various religions that may object to vaccinations. I mean, will we see more lawsuits from corporations over their religious freedom?
There is no doubt we will see more lawsuits. That's one thing we can predict as a result of this decision. And we've already seen lawsuits. There was the photographer who didn't want to photograph a gay wedding because she said that offended her religious beliefs, and Justice Ginsburg cited that case. The imprecision of the ruling is going to absolutely open up. It's going to be great news for lawyers and not necessarily for individual liberty. But exactly, you know, Justice Alito had responses to all these things. He said vaccination is different because there's a public health concern. What was so fascinating is Justice Ginsburg basically said, you know, your right to object stops at my fist, basically. If it's going to harm me, then you can't impose this vision of liberty. Justice Alito responded by quoting moral philosophy. He said it's a tough question whether if someone aids and abets an act that someone else thinks is religiously immoral, that's okay, but the court shouldn't second-guess this. They really seem to be talking past each other because the practical effects of this decision, as you suggest, Reverend, is going to be a lot of litigation, a lot of uncertainty, and it could lead to a wholesale attack on compliance with neutral laws on the basis of religious objections.
Now, Jess, there was widespread support for companies providing contraception 57% of people believe privately owned corporations should provide insurance that includes contraception. And it affects a lot of women. 88% of women in this country have used birth control pills or IUDs. I mean, what is the politics of this, Jess?
Well, I would like to point out that to get to numbers that high, I mean, 88%, you don't see that kind of consensus around baseball and apple pie in this country today. So to get to numbers that high, you're talking about women from all walks of life, from all political parties, of all religions. These are, birth control is a popular thing, and it is a non-controversial thing. So I think the idea that we are having this debate over access, this decision didn't happen in a vacuum. It's one of the latest in a long line of attempts to restrict women's access to birth control being made by the right in every level of government that they get access to. We saw them try to defund the Affordable Care Act, which would dramatically limit women's access to birth control, and they've gone more specific than that. The Blunt Amendment from just like a year ago said that employers could not cover birth control if they didn't like the reason an employee was taking it. So this didn't just come out of nowhere today. This is part of a concerted effort. And we are seeing the gender gap wider than ever before at historic highs. And I think it's because of those numbers you just put on the screen. This means a lot to a lot of women.
Jeff, this court has made a lot of heavy decisions. I mean, voting rights, health care. This court has really gotten into certain areas and seems by many of us that consider ourselves progressive to be inching us backwards in terms of our rights, whether it's voting rights, religious rights, rights of people to be protected against a church-state kind of combined here.
Well, it's certainly true, just as you said, that there are 5-4 decisions in all of those areas, and that's concerned a lot of people. On the other hand, last week, the court issued a series of unanimous decisions, including a great one protecting cell phone privacy and saying that the police can't search our cell phones on arrest. And the unanimity rate this term was actually 66%, which is the highest since the 1940s. So it's kind of a mixed bag. This was the term that the Roberts Court, the liberals and conservatives, converged to protect our digital privacy in a way that could have good effects for NSA surveillance. But the term ended on this very stark, familiar divide where you have 5 conservatives against 4 liberals defending the rights of corporations, the religious liberty and free speech rights of corporations against those of individuals. So it was an amazing term, as all of them are, but this battle is going to start up again next year.
Jess, I have to go here. Do you have any fear that the target here is really Roe versus Wade and that we're on our way for a walk toward that? And having this court ultimately deal with this, Jess?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like I said, this decision wasn't in a vacuum. It was part of a concerted effort to restrict access to birth control. Part of that is part of the right's long-standing effort to repeal Roe v. Wade. Unfortunately for them, Roe v. Wade is really popular in this country. 7 out of 10 Americans want to keep it exactly as it is. So they have to try to find these small, marginal places, employers who might be run by religious people, and then see if they can get in that way. But folks are onto this. I mean, you cited the majority of women wanting to have contraceptive coverage even if the employer has a religious exemption. So I think women are onto it. Women are listening to this, and women have a really clear contrast this year in the midterms. I think we're going to see them come out in November.
Jeff, are we looking at a review of Roe versus Wade and possibly a 5-4 reversal?
You know, it all comes down to Justice Kennedy, and I think as long as the current balance of the court remains the same, Justice Kennedy has made pretty clear that although he'll uphold lots of restrictions on abortions, including so-called partial birth abortions and this latest contraception exemption, he is not going to overturn the core protection that women have a right to choose, early in pregnancy. So that's why so much is at stake in the presidential election.
Yes.
One vote changes on the Supreme Court, Roe gets overturned.
Elections really matter, and this is one of the places where they're going to matter the most.
Well, you're right. The elections are really going to matter, and we were really reminded of that today. Jeff Rosen and Jess McIntosh, thank you both for your time this evening.